Hello. Today is February 5th, 2026. I'm meeting today with Mr. Ron Kessinger
Kessinger, yeah.
in Fort Collins, Colorado, to talk about his life story with emphasis on his time in the service. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for Remember and Honor Veterans History Project. Welcome, Ron, and thanks for sitting down today to tell your story.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family, and take it from there, early life.
All right. I was born August 10th, 1947, in Bloomington, Illinois, in the Mennonite Hospital. I said once before that I was going to look up to see if it was run by Mennonites. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's a conglomerate now. But anyway, my mom and dad are Kentuckians from central Bowling Green, Owensboro, in between area. My dad served in the Navy on the USS North Carolina the whole time in the Pacific during World War II.
Yeah, tell a little history of your. Let's back up and tell a little history of your folks, if you would.
My dad was born in April 25th, 1925. He enlisted when World War II broke out. He was 21, I believe. So, he was there the duration, 3 years. He got out when the war was over in September. He came home, but he was on the highest decorated ship in the Pacific Fleet, 15 battle stars. It was called the Showboat. It and the sister ship were keeled in New York at the shipyard there. And it got its name because it would go in and out of the harbor to do trial runs, and people would line up on the shores to wave at it, watch it go. And because of that, it got the nickname the Showboat.
Did he ever talk much about his service?
Not really.
Because I can't imagine, here's this Kentucky boy out to sea. I mean, it had to be like landing on Mars, I would imagine.
It was. Yeah. No, I tried to get him to talk to me about a lot of things. The most I got out of him was that he was in the Signal Corps. He knew Morse code, like, writing longhand. We didn't use it much, but he knew how to do it. And that was his duty on the ship, was to messages. I don't know if he did anything with the radio in the radio room or what exactly, but I do know he did mention that he was on the deck taking flag messages from another ship and got the message that his father had died, so he had to turn it over to somebody else. His father died in September of 1945, just before, about the time the war ended, I guess. And he was upset because his brother got to come because he was in the Army, and Dad couldn't go. You couldn't get him off the ship. So he talked about that, and he hated the fact, and he took that not hate, but that regret to his grave. He didn't get to go and be with his dad, but he did tell me that, and I did one time go to the cemetery where they're buried and got to sit on my grandfather's grave site, my grandmother's. He talked about that during battles, they were in every major battle. Guadalcanal, I don't remember all there was going on, but Guadalcanal was the big one. 3 other ships and them were firing constantly for 48 hours. 9 guns going bam, 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 bam all the time. He talked about that they had a bunch of different size caliber guns on the ship, and of course the Marines were the gunny guys. And he got in trouble because he wasn't feeding the shells. He was feeding the shells to the gunny. They wasn't doing it fast enough. And then he said that a shell exploded next to him and he got shrapnel in his head. In 2009 or 2010, I got to go visit the North Carolina. I got to walk the decks he walked on.
Wow.
I got to see where he bunked. I got to see there was 2 operating tables. One of them is where they pulled the shrapnel. I got to see that.
What were you thinking could you feel him? I mean,
yeah, I did. Yeah. And just to know, I've got a picture on my phone and not on my phone, but on my tablet of me standing on the aft deck, facing aft of the 3/9 inch on the back. I've got all kinds of pictures of that ship. to stand on the deck, and they redid the deck, I don't know how many years ago, but they cut the teal deck up into brick-sized pieces. And while I was there, I bought two. I bought one for me and one for my brother. I don't know my nephew's done with it. I can't even find mine, but it's a piece of his life. And to see the guns, those 16 inches are massive. And just to think about what they did, it's just, it's mind-boggling. And to see, I saw where the shells are held, and everything it takes to load them guns. And the fact that they were firing, alternate, and loaded them that fast, just amazing. But I went down to the mail room and the engine room and the medical room and electrical room. I saw the generators, and I got to go to the stern and see the massive rudder bars that turn the rudder. Those things are this big around. They're huge, Of course, that ship that big. Just to me, and I couldn't go up very high up. I did get to stand in the command center when they were under battle. The commander and his whatever was under him, admiral, whatever. It was a steel cage. It was about 4 foot in diameter, but it had 20-inch concrete steel reinforced walls around them, so that they, if they ever went down, they wouldn't be able to get out. But I got to stand in that. I got massive anchors and look at all that stuff. And I'm glad I did it. I wish my father would have told me back in 1960 that what they were doing to the ship, and he could have took me and we could have talked about this. The only other thing I ever got out of him was, what did you do on a ship for entertainment? You drank and you smoked. And everybody on that ship was an alcoholic or getting to be that. My dad smoked until he was 45 years old. But when they got home, and this was the difference between them and us in Vietnam, they came home together.
Right. Over a length of time.
Over a month or whatever, And I never did find out where he departed from in the first place or where they came back to, Whether it was New York. I know he spent some time in Puget Sound because the ship got hit. They had to do repairs, but if he would have just told me more about it, would have meant a lot to me. I've had to glean what information I can over the internet and stuff, and I've not found anybody because there's nobody really left around from that era. I mean, there's a couple that are 105 years old, but they're not from the Navy. My dad, he was good at it, But like I said, just the fact that I stood on that deck, my heart just swelled with pride. I was going to take my son with me. He was in school where he did online, but that particular week he had to be there in person or he'd be kicked out. So I asked my daughter, and she was 9 or 10, I guess, and she was having trouble with math. And she came home, and I said, "You want to go?" "Yeah." Well, because she had trouble with math, the teacher said, "All right, well, if you don't get it when you come back Monday," he said, well, that just threw her mind. And she wanted to do that. And I said, her name's Julianne. She's my angel. I said, "You've done the right thing." I said, one of these days I'll try to get you guys back there so that you can see it, if you're interested. But I had to do it all on my own. So it wasn't as fun as I wanted it to be. Anyway, when he came home, he had a drinking buddy. They were really close, and he was really an alcoholic, I guess.
The buddy or your dad?
Buddy of my dad's, and the guy wanted him to have a drink, and Dad said, "No." He says, "I'm done. I'm going home.
Really?
I'm going to have a family." He says, "This life is behind me." He didn't say straight and narrow, but he said, "I'm going to live the right life." And the guy would have nothing that he would take a drink. They were going to get into a fight. And my dad, smart man he was, he took the bottle by the neck, put his thumb over the cap at top, went to his mouth, put it back down, and handed it to him. And that guy walked away happy. My dad never had another drink after that time.
I'll be there.
Then he came home. My mother was born in a little town called Flint Springs. It's about 60 miles south of Owensboro, Kentucky. She was born in 1928. She was the smallest and the last of the family. There's 9 kids in her family. There was 5 in my dad's, his brother and 3 sisters. But anyway, her brother was 20 years older than her. He was born in 1908. So anyway, they grew up together. I asked her how they met. She says, well, in school. Because my dad never got past 8th grade. He had to go home and work, as they almost did.
Yeah, right.
But even without more than an 8th grade education, he was the smartest man I knew. I mean, his mind and his abilities with math and that kind of stuff just totally amazed me. He was better than any fast computer they had at that time, you know. But anyway, he came home, and when she turned 18 on the 8th of September of 1946, 20 days later they got married. He was going to work for his uncle, one of his dad's brothers, as a carpenter. And it didn't pan out. There was no work because wartime, materials were scarce and all that kind of stuff. So he had something else to do. And we had a friend in Illinois that he had known for years. He's like a grandfather to us. And so we went with him, and he ran into a guy there in the city where I was born, which is 30 miles east of Bloomington, called Errol Smith. Went to work for him as a farmhand. You know, I don't know how many acres they have, but he did that for when I was born and maybe another year. And then he decided he wanted to move on. So he went to another little town north a little ways and went to work for a pair of spinster sisters on a 60 or 80 acre farm, corn and beans, and it was horses and an OF-20 4-wheel tractor was his equipment. And I remember riding in the wagon when corn was picked. A lot was on the ground, and I could swear that at that time, I think 3 or 4 years old, you know, the extensions on the harness of a horse, it's like Budweiser horses, you know. I thought they were giraffe ears or something, and so I thought it was giraffes. But I drove the wagon, and he walked along through the corn, and we did that until my brother was born 4 years after me, and we had running water, but we didn't have hot water. So tubs, we didn't have a tub. So we get the old farm tub out and put water, heat it up, you know, with your kettle and stuff, and that's how we took our showers. And
that was always on a Saturday night? Or
yeah, Saturday. Yeah, once a week.
Yeah.
That's when we did it.
And you did it in the order of...
Yeah. It was him and I, and then Mom, and then Dad. And then you threw the water out, and the next week started over. But my brother was 6 months old, and I thought I'd help him take a bath, and I almost drowned him.
Oh.
I pushed him under, you know. And I think he remembered that, because I think he hated me. He got even with me later on down the road, but we did that, and he didn't like the way the sisters were treating him, and so we moved, and we went north another 25, 30 miles to a place called Graymont, Illinois. And 1955, I was 5 years old, or no, I don't know what I was. 1953, I'm sorry. So I was 5 years old, and I helped my dad dig a ditch so we could put in water for the well. And we were there from 1953 until 1957. I started school there. I think the population was 300, very small. And we had 2-class single schoolhouses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all they'd hold with 2 classes. So I went first and second grade in one, second and third in the next one, and then by the time I got to 4th grade, they had built a new grade school. So I started 4th grade there, and I started studying music and playing. And then
What did you play? You said you started.
I played the clarinet. And I read music. I was good at it. I mean, I was just starting, you know.
Yeah.
And then I decided that, well, he decided we wanted to move again to another farm, another 20 miles south of where we were. And I went there in the middle of the year.
Oh, boy.
And if anybody knows, you come in, you're the outcast, and that's the way I felt. So I never did take music again. I met a girl. She was just down the road first. We became best friends, and we're 67 years later. We're still the best friends.
Really? Yeah.
I got along with most everybody.
Yeah. Ron, we took a quick break here, and you realized you wanted to talk a little bit more about your mother. Go ahead and talk.
My mother was the love of my life. I mean, we have trouble now because she doesn't hear very well, and so we text, but she was always supportive of me, and she was a great mother, a great friend. She disciplined you when you did wrong, but it wasn't as harsh as you think it would be. But she was there for everything I ever did. She taught me how to bake and cook. I did a lot of pancakes and German chocolate cakes when I was 5, 6, 7 years old.
Really?
I still love to do some of that stuff every once in a while, but she was my rock, and she grew up in a family of 9 kids, and being the last, she was, the little one that was always being looked after and stuff. And she graduated. Like I said, her and my dad somehow were in school together, even though they were 6 years apart. But she graduated. Her oldest brother, the one 20 years old, was her teacher. I believe it. That's what happened. She graduated when she was 16. Went to Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green for a year in college.
Which wasn't very common back then.
Wasn't very common back then, no. And she studied economics and chemistry, and she got into crafts. And later in her life, she became a quilter after the death of my dad and her remarriage. The guy encouraged her, but she went through a lot. She had 2 miscarriages and had my brother, and then my sister came along when she was 36 years old, I think it was, and it was just to think that, being that young back in those days, what they did, is amazing. So, but anyway, so I'm going to get back to school.
Okay.
I had friends in the first school I went to. In fact, I was in a little play when I was 6 years old. It's about the gingerbread man. My mother made my costume and made a gingerbread, and the girl was playing the other girl, but I fell in love with her. She was just so sweet. I just mooned over, and then I lost track of her. But when we moved to the next place, which was Hudson, Illinois, one of my friends there said, "Well, I've got a cousin lives there." He said, "I'll give you her name, and I'll get a hold of her, and she'll, get you set up and everything." Well, like I said, I came in the middle of the year, and I felt like an outcast, and she was one of these really uppity type girls, in the higher class clique,
Yeah.
I mean, I knew her, and I got along with her, and I got a bunch of other girls and stuff, but we never did see eye to eye, and so it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I was on my own. I met a lot of friends. I had a lot of things going on, and this friend that I'm talking about, she's my best friend. We went to church together. We went bowling together, and her dad wouldn't take us. Her dad was like 43 when she was born. He was a lot older than my dad, but he was more like a kid. My dad didn't do the things that I thought he would. He was 25 when I was born, so he was 35, 36 when the second place we moved to in 1957, and he just didn't do that. It wasn't in his nature for some reason, but her dad did. We go bowling, and we had a pasture, and he had an old hood off of a car or something. He'd drag us around in that hood out in our pasture, and stuff like that. And then I started high school. We actually, this was the first year that they changed from freshman to senior. They went junior high, 7th, 8th, and 9th, and we were the first ones to begin in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois. And So I did that and got into biology class. I got my first girlfriend there. Even though my friend, I was really wanting to be much closer to her. We tried, and in a way I'm glad it didn't work out because we're still the best friends. But anyway, I was in biology class, and the teacher's parents paired people up. Well, everybody had their own people,
Yeah.
Well, this girl and I were left with nobody. He said, well, you two are partners. And we became boyfriend, girlfriend until December of that year. And during that time, I lost the hearing in my left ear from mumps. It destroyed the nerve, and I've never been able to hear it since I was 13 years old or so. But we were sitting at the bleachers at Christmas time, and she's on this side of me talking to me, and I'm not paying attention. She didn't think I was listening to her. I didn't hear her. She got mad and threw me away. And it took me the rest of the year, and I think the finally last 2 months or whatever for school, I had a friend get her, and we got together and we worked it out. And then she went to another school, and then I ended up going to another school.
You guys moved again?
Yeah, I moved one more time.
Oh, wow.
To where I graduated from, the last farm that we were at. It belonged to my dad's first cousin, my second cousin. It actually belonged to his wife's family, and we were farming that farm that was part of theirs. It was 160 acres with 30 acres was pasture, so we only had 100 acres there, and we farmed another piece someplace else. And so we did that, and I went to school there, and I helped Dad. I love farming.
Yeah, you said you really took to farming.
I love farming, and even to this day, I look at things online, guys farming, and I want to be there. But I followed my dad around from the time I was 5 years old, doing things. He started me out the first farm we were at, driving the tractor. He put it in gear, but I was pulling a water tank out to the pasture to water the steers and the cows we had. So that was my first experience at 5 years old driving a tractor, and I was into it.
And he never took up carpentry again.
He never took up carpentry until the last house we had, and he and our friend tore the roof off, and they remodeled it. That's when I knew something. But like I said, I didn't know that he was a carpenter. He had that skill. There's something about him, and it come from that generation of having to provide what's going on. But anyway, I plowed. I disced, I harrowed, I moved the hay bales. When we lived at the farm before and that one there, I cultivated. We had a 4-row cultivator that went mounted on the M tractor that my dad bought from the guy he first went to work for. It was a 1944 M. We'd mount it, and I do all the cultivating. After he cut up, after I think I was 12 years old, something like that. The only thing he would let me do at the end was run the corn picker or the combine, because he didn't think it was something a 16, 17-year-old should be doing. And the picker was mounted on the tractor. And we had a lot of friends in that era that lost their arms because they didn't do safety measures. They'd pull stalks out and it'd grab their arm and take their arm off. So I understood that. But I wanted to farm with him, and that was my biggest dream. Later in life, after I got back home and got married, I had the opportunity, and then he passed before we could get it done.
I got it.
Anyway, I graduated from 1965, 17 years old, dumb and whatever. But I want to do something else, and I thought, well, I want to get into electronics. I love the idea of messing. I was always taking stuff apart, putting it back together, whether it came together back right or not. I didn't know that much about electronics, other than my radio, a little resistor radio, but I didn't take it apart. But I talked to a recruiter, and I signed up for an electronics course in Louisville, Kentucky. It was like a 2-year course, and so
kind of like a trade school.
It was it was basically a trade school. It wasn't like these modern college stuff.
Right.
And unfortunately, we need more tradespeople than we do college-educated people. But anyway, I went there in 1965, September. My dad's cousin had a place for me. I stayed with him for a while until we got my apartment, and I signed up. And first day in class, well, first of all, before I ever took this up, I said, how much math is involved? Oh, no, don't worry about it. Well, when I was a young kid, I loved math. I was good at adding and subtracting. Division was a little hard. Multiplication was better. Well, when I got out of junior high, my assessment, they said, oh, you're good. You should take algebra in sophomore. Well, I flunked the first semester, and I almost didn't get out of that class. So I hated math from then on. I still don't like math. I don't do much math, unless it's with a computer or something. I can do it, but I depend more on because mine's getting gone. But anyway, first day in class, the first thing that went on was figuring out resistance to ohms and that kind of stuff. And how do you do that? With algebra. And I said, that's it. I can't do that. I'm done. So I quit. I don't think I even got through a week. Well, my dad's cousin had a sister. And so I got to go around with them and hung out with them and did whatever we did. We didn't do much stuff, But I'd go play cards with her, and we started drinking a little bit, but that was about it. And then I got tired of it, and I decided I wanted to come home. So in January of 1966, I had a friend there that was going to school there too. We came home. And so now I have to find something to do. Well, I couldn't really work on the farm.
Well, now, during this whole time, you've got the umbrella of the Vietnam War flaring up. Yeah. And you were in the
I was
eligible to be drafted.
I had to sign up for draft when I turned 18.
So what was your status then, or were you concerned about being drafted at all? Or
I've never been concerned about any of that stuff. It just, I don't know why it didn't seem to come to mind. There was nothing really particular about it.
Okay.
I went down and I signed up like everybody did when you turned 18, and that was simply it. But I came home and I needed a job, and so we've got a company there in Bloomington called IAA. It's Illinois Agricultural Association, and they are conglomerate. They have insurance companies are part of their deal, and I went to work down there for them, starting out in the stock room, and I met my boss there, just the greatest guy. He showed me what to do. I met a friend there. We hung out. Didn't go partying, but we hung around a lot. And then I moved up. I became the mail clerk for the insurance agency we were under, and that went on for a couple of months. And then I got the position to go upstairs where they print out the bills, and they had a machine. It was like, I won't call it a decollage machine, but it stuffed the bills into envelopes and sealed them, and I got to do that. And I was enjoying that. I had a time. I bought a 1957 Ford Fairlane two-door sedan. I think I paid $350. Well, that was a lot of money for me then. And I drove it, and I went to two towns to the east of me, and I brought two girls with me, riders, because they needed rides, and we did that. And then I came home, my birthday, August of '66, and my mother stood on the back porch, because that's the entrance went in, and met me with this little envelope, and she had it, and the look on her face, and I opened it, and it says, "Greetings, welcome to the new adventure." So, anyway, I did that, and I went to Chicago at the end of August, and I went through the physical. I called it Chicago stockyards because they run you through like cattle like they do in any stockyards. They didn't care, whether you were crippled or not, And I went there and I went home, and then the 16th of September, or maybe it was the 18th, so I went back up, and I was sworn in. We did all the rituals and the swearing in and stuff like that, and we had a Navy personnel. He was a petty officer. I don't know what his class was, but he was running the show, and we had a couple Mexican boys in there, and they were, no comprende. Well, this boy, he was smart. He walked over and said, okay, can you sign your name? Oh, see. So they signed their names and said, congratulations, you're now in the military. And they went berserk. They'd been tricked, you know. But anyway, there were, I don't know, 200 and some of us there that day we were sworn in, and they needed volunteers. He said, all right, we need somebody for the Marines, and nobody volunteers. All right, this row, you're all Marines. All right, now we need somebody for the Navy. Nobody said a word. All right, this row, you're Navy. We need somebody for the Air Force. The same thing. Well, then they said, okay, they got tell us, all right, you guys are all Army. And so we did that, and then we got on a train.
Do you regret not
No.
raising your arm for one of the other services? No?
No, it started out, I was going to try to join the National Guard, but I was too slow. My letter came, and by then it was too late.
I mean, but while you were sitting in that room, do you not regret signing up
Well,
for the Navy?
I didn't know what to do. I mean, I thought about joining the Air Force or the Navy. I wasn't going to join the Marines because I wasn't that gutsy.
Yeah.
You know, I'm stupid, but not really that stupid. You know, and I admire anybody that's a Marine. They're full of everything they got to have. But no, it didn't dawn on me.
Yeah.
So we all got on train. Everyone went to, and the Army went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I did my 8 weeks of basic training there.
And how was that transition for you going from civilian life into military life and basic training and such? What was that? Was that much of a deal for you, or was it?
I don't think I even really thought about it.
Oh, okay.
It was something that I knew that I had to do, and I was going to do it. I was going to put my best foot forward, but it didn't really mean that much to me.
Okay.
You know? It didn't bother me any.
Okay.
You know, so we're down there, and we were on the Kentucky-Tennessee line. In fact, my cot, believe it or not, one side was on Kentucky side, there was on the Tennessee side, and I would turn it around. So one eye I'd be sleeping, my head in Kentucky and feet, and then I turn on, you know, so I could walk back and forth. And I thought that was so cool, you know. We did all the stuff that everybody had to do, and we didn't like it. You know, you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it falling out, and you got to shave, and I didn't shave one time, and there was a couple of us, and they made us dry shave. I still dry shave to this day. I don't use, just because of, you know, I can't see what I'm doing, you know, type thing, you know, but I did that. And there was 4 units, platoons, or I don't remember what things were because it's been so long. My memory of it's not there, but we did what we did every morning, go have chow and go out and do basic work. We do pull-ups and push-ups and, you know, all the physical training and stuff. And I was pretty good at it because growing up a kid on a farm and hoisting the shovel and mowing and pulling wagons by hand just to get them moved out, you know, I was pretty good shape.
I've always thought that the farm boys had the edge over the city boys.
I still say to this day that I'll tell you later on an example, but they are more well-heeled than city folks. We grew up with responsibilities. When I was young, I milked cows. My dad, we did about half of them. Then my dad got a milking machine. You throw a strap over it and hook it up, and we had 5 cows we did, and then we didn't do that anymore. But we raised steers, and I raised hogs. So I was always taking care of them animals, and I was always, you know, out doing physical work. So, I mean, I was pretty well in good shape, so it didn't hurt me that much.
So you finish up basic training, and where'd you go?
Before I did that, we, every barracks, I'll put it that way, was appointed an acting corporal as a leader to the rest of us. And this one in ours took it to his head and started pushing us around, and we didn't like it. And my sergeant was 5'2", weighed 100 pounds, soaking wet. You didn't want to mess with him, though. His name was Sergeant Garrett. And he got into it with one of the other units. They got into we were doing pugil stick maneuvers. Stick with things on it and you fought with them. And he challenged my sergeant. And that was a mistake. My sergeant just whipped the daylights out of him, straightened him out. He became a really good guy. But anyway, we met on a bivouac, and that's where you go out for a week or two, and you camp out, and you do all your exercise and your training, running and stuff out there. And we all went to the sergeant and said, Sarge, will we be in trouble if we took this particular individual? We're not going to hurt him, but we're going to give him a lesson. We're going to, we call it a blanket party. You cover him up and you smack him. Yep, as long as I don't hear about it. So we did. He didn't hear about it. But I'll tell you what, changed this kid's attitude right away.
Yeah.
He became just like the rest of you. And sometimes you have to put people in their place. I've been put in my place many times, for the stupid things I do. And then we had to do tear gas training. And that's not fun.
Yeah.
It's a cinder block building that's sealed. And you walk in there with your gas mask on, and then they time you. You take your gas mask off, and you've got to recite your name, rank, serial number, date of birth, and social security number. And I did it in about 38 seconds, and I right through it, but a lot of guys couldn't make it, I got through that, and then we were all done. And then my family came. I was dating a girl at the time I went in, and they brought her, and we hung out, and then they went home, and then I went on my next duty station, which was Fort Huachuca, Arizona. This was in late November, early December. Well, early December, because we graduated in November. Went out there, didn't know what I was going to do.
What was that like for an Illinois farm boy going to the desert?
Hot.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, though. I mean, I've been an adventurer. I like to go and get into things. I can't do it as much as I would like to. We're going to try the things get along, but I've always enjoyed going and looking at things. I mean, the weather was hot, I'll say, but it was nothing that I couldn't handle.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what to do with me, and they was going to put me in lineman school, and then they found out I was deaf in my left ear. In fact, let's go back to when I was in basic. We were doing what they called sighting of weapons. They had these styluses, with a pointer on it. You point, and they'd be 200 yards out, and they'd fire a gun, and you'd look to see where the smoke was coming from. And I could pinpoint every one of them every time. But when it came to the audio part, I couldn't tell you if it was in front of me or behind me or north or south. And my sergeant came to me, he says, "What's going on?" He said, "I don't know where it's coming from." "Why?" I said, "I'm deaf." "Oh, you need to get out of here." He said, "You don't belong. You can go home. Go down to the dispensary and tell them." I said, "Okay." Well, by the time I got to it, I had an ear infection. I said, "Well, this isn't going to help me any." He said, "The hell with it. I'm staying.
Wow.
I'm not leaving." So I did, and that's where that is. And I figured too that if my dad could do it, so could I. I've always been patriotic to that sense. Anyway, they found out that you had to have an A profile, and I didn't fit it, so I couldn't do that, and there was nothing there. That's what basically what was there was for that kind of lineman training. I don't know what else it was, but that's all it was. And so I hung around, and then come Christmas time, I went to the PX, wanted to take something home, and I'm looking around, and I found this belt I liked. It had a cowboy buckle. I've always been a cowboy, even if I wasn't at the time. And I put it on, and I went some other stuff, and I forgot I had the belt on. And as I walked out the door, the MP stopped me.
Oh, no.
Caught me for stealing. I said, "No, I'm not stealing. You got that belt?" I said, "Oh, crap." I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I didn't, I put it on, tried it, and I forgot all about it." Well, they were going to throw me in the brig, and then they decided not to. And so they took the belt, and I got reprimanded. And I went before the commander. He says, "All right, it's Christmas time. You're going home for Christmas. We'll deal with it when you get back." So I went home for Christmas that year. I rode the train, and it was like a slow boat to China. It was a mail train, and it stopped every podunk stop that they had. And we finally got to Memphis. We had changed trains to go north to Chicago. And I got to Chicago and got on a bus and went home. My dad and mom picked me up. And I was home for Christmas. And then my dad took me north to a place called Oglesby, Illinois. It's 40 miles or 50 miles west of Chicago. There's a train station. It's the same train line. I got, well, all right, I know it's going to be 24 hours because that's what happened coming home. Well, it was a fast passenger, and I was home in 17 hours, back at base in 17 hours. And I got back, and I'm looking around, and these mattresses are all over the ground. I said, what's going on? We're only 6 miles from the Mexican border there. They went where they were told not to go, and they did something they weren't supposed to do, and they brought something back they don't need. So we're fumigating. That was into that. Anyway, I went home for Christmas, and then I went back, and when I got back, my punishment was to move rocks from one side of this driveway to the other, and then back again. I did that twice. And then I had to paint the floor of the commander's office and paint the walls. And then I was let go. And then he said, all right, we've got a new assignment for you. I said, where am I going? He said, well, we're thinking about, clerks. He said, we're going to send you to Fort Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that's where I went. This was in first part of 1967. I got there first week of January. I went through training there. My best friend brought my girlfriend to meet me and brought me home, and then I took the bus back and finished that out. And I think it was maybe a month and a half, 2 months at the most. And then I went from there to Fort Leavenworth, Missouri for AIT and finished up. And they put me in finance when I was at Fort Harrison as a payroll specialist and money management handler and that kind of stuff, and records, dealing with records and stuff. And then I finished that out there in Leonardwood. While I was there, I went home, I think it was in March, for a week or two, and I came back. And when I was in Kentucky, this woman and I drank screwdrivers, and they're made with gin. And I got sick on it. So when I came back, the first thing I said was, all right, who's got the gin? Oh, nobody. And I said, you're full of it. Walked over to the very locker that had it and opened it, and there it was. Said, how'd you know? And I told him the story, and I said, can't stand the smell of gin. I don't know if I can yet today or not, but I knew it was there, and it really surprised him. And then we hung around there, when it was off hours, and we had an outdoor roller skating rink. And I met a girl there. Her sergeant was part of my squad, so, but we became friends, and I walked around with her, and we carried on a little bit, nothing serious, her and her sister and friend and I. But we attended to the roller rink, and we had some guys were giving us, acting up. And pretty soon I hear, hey, you, come here. Hey, you, come here. And I turned around, and there were just 4 black guys behind me. I said, okay, what are we in for now? So I walked over, and I said, all right, what's going on? You got in trouble with them guys? There's nothing we can't do. I said, well, if you do, just let us know. We'll take care of it.
Really?
And I'll tell you what, I've got black friends I trust more than any white guy in the world. They get disrespected, and it's not right, And I never had any when I was in Vietnam, but if I had, they'd have been my best friends. I trusted them no end. You just have to learn how to respect people. But
Okay.
And then come August, I think it was, I got to thinking, I hate military stateside, the pomp and circumstance, the standing in attention and your parade rest and the spit and polish, and brass and all that. I don't like it. I'm going to get out of here. So I volunteered to go to Vietnam.
Really? Wow.
And when I told my dad, he was livid.
Yeah.
I can understand why, but at the
Right.
time, he tried to talk me out of it. And I said, no, I'm going. I don't like it here. I just don't. I don't want to do it. And so he came and picked me up, and I went home, and I was there. I think leave at a time was maybe 30 days. I don't know if I had it all or not, but then he took me to Bloomington. We had a little airport there, and I got on a DC-3 tail dragger. I love them planes to this day, And I flew to Chicago to O'Hare Airport, and we had a little air turbulence, and it's dropping, and I'm just hurraying, because I'm that way. Got on, and I went to, I had a cousin was living in Mercer Island in Washington State, Seattle. I went to, that's where I was going. My outstation was Fort Lewis, Washington. Mm-hmm. So I went there 3 days early, and I spent time with them, and then they took me to McCord Air Base, and then from there was Fort Lewis. And then we went back to McCord and got on the plane, and we spent our time heading to North or South Vietnam.
And what was the routing there?
We started out. We stopped in Anchorage for fuel. We stopped in I don't know where it was, Guam or Okinawa for fuel. We stopped in Honolulu for fuel, and then we stopped in Tokyo for fuel. And they wouldn't let us off in Tokyo, and I know why. Guys would have disappeared in a heartbeat.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then we flew into Cam Bay. That was different too.
Yeah, talk about landing, and I've heard so many different stories about landing during attacks, landing and opening the door, and it's like a steam bath coming in. What was the smells? What was your experience when you landed?
I believe if I would have landed in Saigon instead, it would have been a lot worse than what. But Cameron was timid compared to any place else there was. The biggest thing was the smell and the heat.
Yeah.
And I've been used to heat, so yeah, it was hot. It was 125. Didn't really bother me that much, but the smell kind of got to me, But and there was nothing, no attacks going off at the time.
Yeah.
I went to the clerk's office and checked in, and they said, well, we don't have your assignment yet, so I'm not staying here. No, you're going to be someplace else, so we'll come and get you. All right. So I went around and I watched movies and drank beer with friends and got to know a lot of people. And after 2 weeks, I'm going, wait a minute. They should know something about it. They're going to think I'm AWOL or something. So I went, we've been looking for you. And I says, baloney. I says, you knew where it was. So, well, your duty station, it's up north. Okay, that's fine. Do I get to take any equipment? No, you don't get anything. I go, why? Don't know. So they put me a C-127, and we started north. I think it's about 150 miles up to from Cameron to where I was going to go. We stopped in Pleiku, which is 60 or 70 miles west of where I was. My bag got off there, and I didn't.
Oh, no.
So when I got to Tuy Hoa Air Base, got off, and I went to my unit, which was the 22nd Finance Division. All I had was on my back. So I had to go to PX and buy clothes and all that stuff. And I started asking around about weapons and stuff. So I had to find my own helmet, my own flak vest, and a weapon. And my first week or two I was there, I ran into a kid I got pretty good friends with. His name was Stephen Bishop. He was a pothead. And I said, do you know where I can get a weapon? Oh, yeah. He said, I got this .38 Smith & Wesson Special with a holster. How much is it? $15. Okay. That's a lot of money, So I bought it, and I carried it around. And we used to go to town on weekends, and on one particular trip, everybody in there was a pothead except me. And then one of the guys, the leader, his name was Gary Rose, of all names, and he wore rose-colored glasses. And he was sitting up in front. We'd taken the deuce a half into town, and I stood up to do something, and I didn't have my pistol latched in, and it fell out, and I stumbled. And he said, hey, Ron, here, take a toke. I said, no, I don't do that. So he made me take a toke, and I stumbled again. He said, oh, wow, you're high. Well, you don't get high doing that, But he was happy, and I was happy. So we went into town, did our stuff, and I loved going to town. We had a couple of twin Vietnamese girls that everybody fawned over.
Well, that begs the question. I mean, let's go back to your dad's war. I mean, he was in the Navy, but all the land units, they knew that, 5 clicks up the road was the front line. Mm-hmm. Where in your war, there was no front lines. Were you apprehensive going into town, not knowing if there was friend or foe that you were dealing with, or?
I think I was stupid.
Oh, okay. All right.
For some reason, I was kind of aware of my surroundings, but I wasn't afraid of it because of where we were. we were right on the beach. My unit. I mean, I could walk out our office 100 yards and walk into South China Sea. But town was 5 clicks or whatever away. But it never really entered my mind. I mean, after Tet, I started watching what was going on. But at that time, and these girls were sweet. They were 12 years old, and everybody loved them. They was always buying them shoes, and I know. I bought them a lot of shoes, and I know what they're doing. They're selling them to their friends or giving them to their family, But we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
That was our entertainment for the time. But you're talking about my dad. The USS North Carolina was the escort ship for the USS Enterprise carrier.
Yeah.
And when Pearl hit, they heard that the showboat was coming, and they all couldn't wait. Because it was the ship of the day. When it pulled into Pearl, I mean, it was like a family reunion. But it and its sister ship escorted the Enterprise wherever it went. And at one particular time, they took a shell from a German torpedo, or maybe it was a Japanese torpedo, and it hit below waterline, and it killed 10 sailors in the shower. That was the only casualties at the entire war for that ship.
Wow.
But they kept up their speed and maintained their duty with the Enterprise, and then they went back to Pearl and got the repairs and went back and did it again. But you're talking, they knew, so far out. They were on the ship, so they were 25 miles out to sea. Most of these places, they were within 800, 900 yards or so of Guadalcanal, because, I mean, they were bombing, shelling it all the time. But it was a lot different, what I was. But because of where I was at when I was doing, I really wasn't that concerned.
Well, talk a little bit about the base you lived on and what your housing situation was like, the food was like. Talk a little bit about your duties and just daily life.
Well, we were in Quonset huts, and if anybody knows, they're round top metal buildings. Ours had metal roof and wood sides, and we housed about 25. In fact, all of our units, people stayed in this one. We had 5 different ones for us and for NCOs, and then the higher, the officers. Well, most officers had better quarters and stuff, food. We didn't care that much. We were smart enough. We went to the hospital mess hall because they had the good food. Obviously, you take care of your patients until somebody messed up. Wasn't know if it was us and we were all thrown out. So we had to go to. We wouldn't go to our mess hall, so we started going to PX. When I went over there, I weighed 180 pounds. When I came home, I weighed 135 because I had beer and hot dogs every day.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
Every day. Yeah. And I lost, a lot of weight, But that was my food.
Were living conditions comfortable? I mean, being on the coast, did you get the heat? Did you need air conditioning, or was?
No, we didn't have air conditioning.
No.
That's a no-no. You couldn't have run it anyway. Generators are too far out. That's all we had for most power was generators. And they were giants, like they have in other things. So we didn't know. We had fans, but that was it. And the office was, I think it was a 2-story. I don't remember what was upstairs, or it might not even been a 2-story. But I think there was a ladder or steps that went upstairs. But and like I said, 100 yards, we could walk out into South China Sea and walk out, a quarter of a mile chest deep. That's how good it was,
And so your duties there were in finance?
Was in finance and records. I had 2 good friends. They were medevac choppers. One was warrant officer 3 and the other was a colonel. And this warrant officer could fly one of those medevacs 2 inches off with the runners 2 inches off the ground, full tilt, never touch. He got to be pretty good friends. I've forgotten his name, but he went out on a pickup, on a dust off, and was shot down and killed.
Oh.
And so the colonel went out to find him, and he was shot down and killed. So I had to process their records, and that was part of my job, processing people coming in, processing them going out. But the death records is what bothered me the most. You know, it just it's something that I've gotten over it over the years, but just at that time, and being he was a friend, you know, it got to really bother me. I had a kid that my brother and I went to school with that got married. He was 19 years old in 1968, came into Saigon, and 3 weeks later was killed. He'd just gotten married. I had a friend that I worked with at the company that I was working for, was eight months behind me in age, and he volunteered. He enlisted. I was drafted, you know, but he enlisted, and I was there from September of 1966 to '67 till '68. He came in June or July of '68 and was killed in August of that year. I've gone many times to his gravesite and looked him stuff online and stuff. I didn't have to process his records, but they were my friends. And my wife's cousin was killed in 1967, just before I got there. He was in the Marines. And so, you know, that stuff bothers me to that point. But being as I was in finance, I had control over their money. Money talks, bullshit walks. And we went to town one Sunday. And we had our hats, but we weren't wearing them. And some MPs accosted us and said, "Put your hats on." I said, "No, we ain't going to do it." And they wrote us up. And I got their names. And I went back and I started looking through their records. And they're allowed to take advances, just like any, you know, in a company you work for. You could probably take an advance on your pay if it's profitable or whatever. They could take advances on our pay. And it was my duty to make sure they got their pay. I flew medevac chopper twice down to Da Nang with my captain to pick up the payroll money to pay these guys, you know, which was a treat.
Yeah.
You know, we had no weapons if we'd have been shot down. But anyway, I went and looked at these guys' records, and I went in and I took every dime they had. And we were only getting $125 a month. And that's with combat pay. And they come crying and crawling. And I said, "Hey, you know, you took the money out. You owe it." "Well, yeah, but what are we going to do?" I says, "I don't really care what you're going to do. This is the way these things work." But I said, "You know, we had an incident here a while back." And I said, "I know that if you talk to me, we can work this out." And they apologized, and I said, "Okay, I'll fix you up." And I did. I gave them their money. Well, it wasn't long after that I don't know what his rank was, but driver come running in, screaming out, "Who was driving that Jeep out there?" And we said, "He was." "What's going on?" "Well, he went by and splashed me and my colonel. We want his ass." And I says, "Shut up." I said, "First of all, that's not going to happen." I said, "Tell me who they are." Well, I got their names. And guess what I did? Yes, that's what I did. Now, officers are allowed and entitled to BAQ, which is basic allowance and quarters. They get $300 to $400 regardless. You can't take it. But I did. And I wasn't vicious about it. I wasn't angry about it. I just was going to make sure things were in control. And they come in crying. And I said, "What's the matter?" "Well, I don't have any money. How am I going to live?" And I said, "Not my problem." "Well," I says, "okay, here we go again." I said, "If you apologize to my captain for the way you guys treated him, I'll fix this. Otherwise, no." And they apologized, and I fixed it. Like I said, money talks, bullshit walks.
Yeah.
You know. That was the worst thing I ever did to anybody, and I wasn't being vicious about it. I've never been vicious about that kind of stuff, you know. But I needed to teach them respect, and I try to respect. I mean, I'm not good myself sometimes, but I try to respect everybody I come in contact with. And then my time came short. I got to where the INSO barracks, we weren't allowed, but they had the liquor. And I was friends with 2 or 3 of them, and I said, okay, if you come over and tend bar, you can drink as much as you want. Well, I didn't know the first thing about tending bar. When I was young, I didn't really drink much. I wasn't that much into beer. I don't like it really to this day. I can drink it very well with tomato juice, because it cuts it. But I love the hard stuff. And for every drink I made then, I make me one. And I love putting maraschino cherries on it. So I didn't crawl back, but it was hard to get back to barracks after, because I'd have 8 or 10, 15 drinks. And then it came close to my time to de-roast, which is going home. I think I had a month, maybe a month and a half. My trainee came in, and I was training him, but I could only do that so much, and I was bored, want something to do. So I went down to the motor pool, and I said, hey, can I get a license? Because even then you had to have a license to operate a vehicle there. And I got it. And I started driving 3/4 ton and deuce and a halves and stuff like that. And my sergeant, he was a dilly. I think he was 47 years old in 1968. He was a recruiter from Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I said, what are you doing over here? Oh, he's had to come see what you guys are having fun with, and he was a coot. We had this game that you put a dollar bill on your wrist and you try to burn through it with a cigarette. First one to flinch lost. He never lost. He had burns up down his arm, I don't know where he's at. I know he's not alive anymore, because that's, at that age, but he was such a cool dude. But anyway, I went down, and I don't know if it was him or one of the other sergeants came in one that woke me up at midnight and said, hey, Ron, need you to take 2 or 3/4 and go out to air base and pick up this music group, bring it back to the USO force. Okay, so I went and got a friend, took him with me. We wanted, I think it was 8 miles, something like that. And it was like a family band. It was a husband and wife, and the star was single, and there were 3 other musicians. And I put all the men in the back, and I put the girls between us. And unfortunately, or haphazardly, the stick shift was sloppy. I mean, it went all over the place. And the married girl was wearing a skirt, and she's sitting next to me, and I was shifting that. And we're laughing, and it was a great time. Anyway, I did that until it was time to come home. Talk about entertainment. We didn't get to go to the shows. I don't know, reason why, I don't know why. Didn't bother me. I had bought a Kai reel-to-reel tape deck to do stuff. My dad and I played country music growing up, and I had my guitar there with me and play it. I sold it before I came home, but I didn't want to carry it around. But he and my sister, she was 4 or 5 years old, sang a song on a little cassette, sent it to me, and I taped it reel to reel, and unfortunately I've lost it. I don't have so any of that is no longer there. But then when I came home, I sold the tape to a guy, and I packed up my duffel bag and shipped it home. And I got on the plane and flew to Cameron and got on the Big Bird and left.
Well, let's back up a few questions here. You said you weren't very cautious until the Tet Offensive.
Yeah.
What was that period like for you guys up there?
I said I lost my gun, right? So I go back to Steve and I said, Steve, I need another weapon. Can you find this? Yeah. And so for $60, I bought an AK-47 with 2 30-round banana clips taped back to back, and that was my weapons. And then Tet hit. And I wasn't really worried that much about it at the time. Where we were at, we had a village on the shore north of us, one south of us, and one to the west of us. So they had to get through them to get to us first of all. But I said to myself, okay, if they breach, and of course we had our military, and then we had and the air base did get slaughtered. They got hit pretty hard. But that's, 10 miles out or so.
10 miles.
It's still pretty close to us, But I said, if they breach, I got 30 rounds, and I'm done. And we were lucky. Tet didn't get over fast, but in our section, it went pretty quick, and we overcome it. A lot of people didn't make it through it either, and Way and Fubino, Quezon didn't. They were heavily damaged, but that was the closest I ever came to real danger, I think. And I got through it.
Wow. What was, most of the times when you did a tour over there, you got an R&R. Did you get an out-country R&R?
I did. In fact, the lead singer of the group I brought out to the base, they were from Sydney.
Okay.
And she said, when you take R&R, come to Sydney. Okay, where am I going? She said, you can come stay at my house. Okay, well, I said, well, we'll go. She was going to show me the sights of Sydney. And so I put in for R in Sydney, and they wouldn't let me have it.
Oh.
Well, it's obvious. It's a 27-hour flight or something like that, and that takes up a lot of... You only get, a week and a half or so, 2 weeks at the most leave. So I put in for Japan, and they wouldn't let me have that, so I ended up with Penang, Malaysia. And I loved it.
Yeah.
I love the Oriental culture. I met some people there, and I got a guide. It was a female guide. She took me around, showed me the different places, and I had another guy that I rode the rickshaw with, and he took me to temples and gardens. And,
oh, nice.
And I've got pictures. I don't know where they're anywhere. But they took me to this temple, and it's got snakes, like coral snakes. I don't know really what they really were, but they claimed that they were poisonous, and you were there after smoking them like they do honeybees, to calm them. And I'm standing there with my hands open, and I put these snakes in my hands, and I'm just there looking at them, Wasn't a bit scared of them or anything, And we drank a lot of beer, and I did a lot of sightseeing, took a lot of pictures, and I've lost them all, and then we went back to duty. I think this was in probably, I want to say, June of '68. So, it was halfway through my tour.
Okay, all right. So, so you said your tour date came up. You got on the bird, came home. What was, maybe not so much for you because you said you don't never felt like you were in danger, but so many of the guys I've interviewed said, boy, when that captain said we're out of Vietnam airspace.
Somebody asked me one time what it was like. In World War II, like I said earlier, they all came home together.
Yeah.
And somebody said, I know a lot of Marine units went over as a unit, came home as a unit. But most of us went over as individuals.
That's right, yeah.
And came home as individuals. So we had no support.
Well,
But
you went as a group. World War II, came home as a group most of them on a ship for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
They could talk with each other and kind of.
And I'm sure my dad did that too.
And here, once again, a different story with your war. You're in this war zone one day. 24 hours later, you're back in civilization. That had to be kind of a culture shock, I would think.
That's kind of strange. It was 128 degrees in the shade, and when we left, I think it was 123. We got on the bird, and of course, everybody knows that this done is the minute the wheels leave the ground, it's a hooray.
Yeah.
But we landed at McCord, and then took me to Lewis, and it was 63 degrees in September when I got to Fort Lewis, and I got sick. Got a cold. Being that I was in records, I and two other guys that I know, we processed everybody that came in on that flight, and I think there was 130 of us or so that came in on that flight. That's where we went, and I helped process this all out so we could get ready to go home. And then I went to McCord, and I went out to SeaTac, got on a plane, and went to O'Hare.
So you actually mustered out of the service?
Yeah, I mustered. Yeah,
okay, you didn't have anything left.
No, I had nothing left. I was a 2-year. I got out on the 19th of September, but that's a funny thing too. When we left, it was noon on September 19th, 1968. It was noon, September 19th, 1968, when we got to McCord.
Wow.
Because the date line's crossing,
Yeah.
Kind of, weird, but yeah.
Did you have any issue when you went to SeaTac to get on the plane
No.
as a Vietnam veteran? I mean, you weren't spitting on or yelled at or anything like that? Or?
To be honest, I don't remember.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because I didn't have any, all I had was what I had on. And I'm pretty sure we had our skivvies, or
Civilians?
Our uniforms,
Oh, really? Oh, geez.
our khakis.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get messed up. Because I didn't have any other clothes. I don't believe I had any, because it was all gone. It was just me, basically. So, and I know that so many guys, and I've talked to some guys personally about it, that were spit on and called baby killers and beaten on and stuff. And I do know a lot of it happened in San Francisco and L.A. Where we was at, we were kind of far removed from that scene, per se. But O'Hare was a liberal place. You know. I don't remember everybody bothering me. I got to O'Hare. I don't remember anybody saying anything to me. I got on a bus and went downtown to catch the bus home, and nobody bothered me there. I had a taxi driver wanted to take me, and I said, "That's 103 miles. Well, he's going to get a round trip." And I said, "No, I'm not doing that. You know, I'm not going to do that." But yeah, I did experience the trauma that all my friends did. So I don't know how to relate to it sometimes.
Right. Yeah. But you were still in a war zone. I mean, you never felt even the slightest bit concerned or...
Had I been any place else, if I'd have been at Pleiku,
All right.
Because they were heavily hit too. But where I was at, it didn't cross my mind that you know we can lose it here. Other than, like I said, when Ted happened. But I can't hardly imagine. I've got a friend that passed away in November. Was a Marine, and I think he was on Hamburger Hill or awfully damn close to it. And he showed me the books and showed me where on the website to go to see all the went on. We took it and let it go, and took it and let it go, and took it and let it go. I never got him to talk much. He was an angry man when he come home, and he was fighting everybody. As he aged, he come to terms with it, and I came to terms with it. We started acknowledging that we were Vietnam veterans, even though I was not in the thick and you know, being in the rice pads and stuff. It finally took me a while to realize
that you could have been. You know?
That I could have been. I mean, my finance unit could have been right in the thick of things. We had like 32 different finance companies in Vietnam that took care of a bunch of stuff. It's hard for me to fathom, and I try very hard. Where I really learned what went on there was when the movie We Were Soldiers came out about Lieutenant Moore in the 1st Cav. And I saw flares going off, and they come down in parachutes. I saw them going off all the time around us. But with a scene where they're going off and it lights up, and the Vietnamese, the Gooks, are right there at the trench, right on top of them, it makes you stand up and take notice that, without, if that happened, they'd all been dead.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand, and I get that, When I left home, nobody knew I was gone. And when I got home, nobody knew I was there to come back. I was an insignificant mole.
To go along with the previous question at the beginning, how was that transition then for you, being in the military and being over in Vietnam, going from military to civilian life? Was that much of a transition?
Well, I said once before I didn't know, but I think it was kind of harsh in reality. I was under orders. I had a regimen that I had to follow, and I was lax a lot of time, but I'm coming back to it, and I'm free. I can do anything I want, but that was probably the extent of my emotions of it. I never talked to my family about what I did. Like I said, my dad did not want me to go. In fact, while I was over there, I had a cousin who was in the Air Force, and he was stationed out in Honolulu, and they flew supplies to Cameron and other areas there, and they'd come home for a reunion and talk to my dad, and I'd go, "Where's he at?" "I don't know." "Is he okay?" And Wendell told me later, he says, "What did I tell your dad?" I said, I don't know. I'm not in combat. But he says, "I'm pretty sure he's okay." And I was, but And Dad and I never talked about it.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't. I talked to my brother some about it afterwards, but that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
My best friend I grew up with, we talked some, but I never got into what, because I was sort of ashamed that I was not the one being shot at.
Wow.
I'm not the one that died.
Wow.
Sometimes I do really wish that I would have been left there.
You've never overcome that shame?
No, I haven't. I've gotten used to it. I mean, I've come to terms with it. Like I said, I finally started wearing this hat, or a hat like it. My friend passed away 5 years, bought me a hat, and I started wearing it. And Danny started wearing his too. And we started doing these things with this stuff. But it took me a long time because I wasn't in the thick of it.
Wow.
But as I said once before, you've got every piece that works with it. Somebody had to drive the truck to take the fuel. Somebody had to drive the truck to take the ammo.
Well, I think what they say,
Somebody had
for
to
everybody
drive
that
the
was in
ambulance.
the thick of it at the tip, had nine support people behind them.
You're right.
That would never...
Yeah, and like I said, what I did, money talks.
Yeah.
You know, I could control people if I wanted to, but I finally realized, you got to cook. Some cooks were pulled out of being cooks and put on the firing line. And like I said, my wife's cousin was in the Marines, and there's a book out by his commander. I still haven't found it where it is, but he talks about Kenneth, and Kenneth was not a sniper, but he was like a sniper. And they were ambushed in a building, and Kenneth stuck his head out to get the guy, and the guy shot him in the shoulder or something, and Ken reached out, shot him, but he got somewhere else, and the commander said, they got him, ready to med him to a hospital, and Ken says, "I'll be back." And 11 days later, he was dead. And I think about that, and I think about the guys. Nobody realizes this, but a lot of these people, 17, 18 years old, we were dumb, and a lot of them came from the Appalachian Mountains, where they were not schooled, and the military did this on purpose. Get the dumb people that you can control them. You can't control me. I'm smarter than that. I know how to work some things, but I was dumb too. 19-year-old kids, 2 days in country are dead. Chaplains are out there in the midst of them, they're dead. And it took me a long time to come to that. I've done it.
Wow. Well, take your story now. You're home. Take your story from there.
I went back. Well, my girlfriend and I were engaged to get married when I got back. And so on November 9th, 1968, we got married. And we moved to Bloomington. My dad helped us move into an apartment. And I went back to work for the company that I was working for previously. But that job was taken, and there was nothing else to do except they put me in the basement in the computer room. And I run punch cards through a machine and put the data on big 18-inch reels. Didn't teach me anything to show me this is how you run it, this is what you do. And I thought, if I screw up one reel, I've ruined a lot of data. And I was by myself at night, and I hated it. And I told my wife, I said, I don't like this, I want out of here. Let's move to your hometown, which was, 18, 20 miles north, Lexington, Illinois. So we went back, we moved to her hometown, and I got a job with the city, doing street maintenance, and I worked in the water treatment plant. There was just another old guy and me. His name was Rex. We got along really good. We had a lot of fun together and stuff. And wintertime, I plowed the streets. And summertime, we chipped streets with chip rock. And I would, we do all kinds of different work, until I started doing things on my own without asking permission. I was rocking alleys that the city council didn't think needed to be done, and because I did not consult them, they fired me on the spot. But in this meantime, getting back to my dad and farming, our cousin was going to quit farming, and Dad said, come to me one day, he says, "Hey, you want to farm with me?" And I says, "What do you think I've been waiting on?" I said, do I have to answer that question? Well, this was June. He said, well, he's going to get rid of it here pretty soon. But he says, it's not enough for 7 people because I was expecting a baby pretty soon. My wife was pregnant. And he said, I said, that's fine, Dad. This is before I got fired, but I've got this job. I'm doing good. I'm making $130 a month, something like that. And gas was 28 cents a gallon. And car payment was nothing. I paid for it out of my savings. I said, I can do that and come over on weekends and nights and whatever needs to be done. It was cool. And then October that year, it was corn picking time, and we had this tractor with the corn picker on it, and one of the gathering chains broke, and him and my cousin were underneath working on it, and he had a heart attack. And he went in the house, laid on the floor, and took nitro, and they come and took him to the hospital, and my wife called me at work and said, come home, Mom's coming, your brother's coming to get you, your dad had a heart attack. So we took him to the hospital, and he was in there from middle of October until the first part of October, November, I guess. And he came home, and everything was going to be good. I went over there at night, and I'd go out and plow because I smoked cigarettes. My mom said, "What's he doing out there at night?" And Dad knew what I was doing. I smoked, and I didn't smoke around her and stuff. But anyway, he come home, and come Christmas, he had gone and got a physical, and the doctor had told him he was good for 25. Now, if you don't understand what that means, it means he was good for $25,000 in life insurance.
Oh, yeah.
And so 2 days before, or the day before Christmas Eve, he wanted to go shopping. And so I took him shopping, and we're running out and stuff, and I found this little Japanese tool set I wanted, but I couldn't afford it. And we went on, and then we had Christmas Eve and Christmas Day come around, and guess what one of the presents was he gave me? Was that little toolbox. And I made a mistake, and I didn't mean it the way I said it, because I said, I could kill you. 6 hours later, he's dead.
Oh, wow.
We're sitting around after we had dinner, because all our family were musical. My dad taught me. I was getting very good with the guitar. And I heard a ping, and I looked over and I seen this look on his face, and I looked, and one of the strings on his guitar had broke. And if I would have really been thinking, if I'd have lengthened the string, I could have fixed it, but the way it was, it didn't. And it broke off the little tab on the end that goes in the hole that the peg sits in. I said, I can't fix it, Dad. And he put the guitar down, and he went into my brother and sister's room and laid down. And that was the last I saw him alive. He knocked on the wall. My brother heard him, went in there, and he told my mother, don't tell anybody. Don't want to ruin Christmas. Well, he told Mom and I. And I went there, and I tried to do what I thought was CPR. I didn't know much about it, but I knew to try to get his tongue out. I put his billfold in it. It didn't help. He was already gone. But I called, and unfortunately, I called the ambulance, and the ambulance driver was also the mortuary guy, and he was drunk on his ass. It took him forever to get there, and I called the doctor and said, I'm taking him to the hospital. No, bring him by. No, he said, bring him by. So I did, and of course he pronounced him dead.
Wow.
And so there went the end of my farming.
Yeah. Wow.
And I hated my cousin, because as soon as my dad was in the ground, they threw Mom off the farm. And that's where my sister comes in. We're talking about farm and town. My sister grew up on the farm. She was 7 years old when my dad passed away. She doesn't remember anything about him, but she got in with some friends, and they got to doing things that kids do, and got in a lot of trouble, and she started drinking, and finally got her life back together. But that's why I say I wish that the family I have now, I wanted to be on the farm. I wanted to grow up with responsibilities. I mean, they're good kids, they do fine, but I think you miss out on a lot of things if you don't get to do this kind of stuff. And,
Yeah.
But anyway.
So now, with this curveball thrown at you, where'd you go from there then?
Well, then I went to work for the gas station there in town that her friend's cousin worked for, and he got me the job. And his name was Gleason, and it was a mobile station, and I loved it. I mean, I had a lot of fun there. Gas was 34 cents a gallon then, and cigarettes were 30, and I said, well, if it gets higher, I'll quit, and I didn't. But anyway, I worked there for almost 2 years. My son was born in February after my dad passed away. In fact, his birthday is in 2 weeks. He would have been 56 this year, and he passed away. He passed away in 2013 from strokes. But anyway, 6 months after he was born, we had a tornado come through, and it started out southwest of town, and there were sirens and going off, and my wife's at home with him, and I called her up and I said, open the windows and pull the mattress over top, get in the corner, and I'll be there as soon as this is over. Well, I walk outside, and wind is a howling. I look, 2.5, 3 miles to the southwest, and these toothpicks are going around in a circle. They weren't toothpicks. They were 4 foot in diameter, or 5 foot in diameter oak trees. And they were just floating. Well, they come up and follow the tracks. And I walked out. Well, the other thing is the boss wanted to shut all the windows and doors. Now, this is all glass. We had all glass around the bays. I said no. And it was all that time by that time to get the door open and get it jammed with a screwdriver. The suction was so bad. I walk outside and I watch it go up the railroad tracks, bounce off the gravity elevator downtown, and then go east toward the schools. And it was over. I went and found my wife, and everything was fine. We had a big old tree. It was about 3 foot in diameter, had a straw through it, clear through it, the neighbor's yard. And I looked over and you could see the cracks. It had raised the high school and grade school right across the street from us. And it had taken the roof, the whole entire roof, and lifted it 4 to 6 inches and then set it back down. But it didn't destroy it. That was fun. I loved it. Boss was scared to death, And then I had a girl come by, and her folks over in the restaurant, and the other, yes, we became good friends, and she come stay at night, because she didn't want to go home, and we were really good friends. Well, they thought I was doing something I shouldn't be. They didn't think it looked right in the face of the station, so they fired me. And so I went to work. The guy that I used to change the oil in his garbage truck, I went on with him. He was a cousin to the guy that later married my ex-wife. So I rode with him, and I went and picked up garbage. I was a garbage man, and I loved it. I'd ride on a skid, and we'd go to this one neighborhood, and I was wearing cowboy boots back then. And this one dog, little bit striding, and come in and tried to bite me. Well, he bit the cowboy boot instead. And I think it killed the dog because next when we went out there, he was no longer to be around. But I did that for a while, and then when I was working for the city, I had a friend that worked for the township. Now, we had city, township, and county. They're all the same kind of thing, but the township was inner sanctum, and the county was the whole enchilada. And we did the same things. We did rock, we did chipping and stuff, and they all liked to drink beer. Like I said, I've never been a real beer drinker. I did it because that's what you do as friends. And I could drink anybody under the table as long as they had tomato juice, but I came home late one night, and I met my wife at the door, or she met me at the door and said, "Where you been?" And I said, "None ya." And I took her by the shoulders and walked her 2 feet back to the door or wall. And immediately, as soon as I did it, I knew I'd screwed up. And in the long run, it was the thing to do. But she comes screaming in one day and said, "You got a date with your lawyer?" And I said, "When you make it." And we got divorced. Long story short. So I was doing this other stuff, and I went to work for a manufacturing company. They made combine sieves for back in the old days. Nowadays, most combines have rotary. They don't use them. And we made sickle bars to make them floating. So bean heads, you put them on there, and they would float with the ground so that you could cut evenly. And I went to doing that, and I did that for almost a year. Making good money, but we're working overtime. And I finally realized after a while that 6 or 8 hours I was working on Saturday and the hours I was working on Friday, I was losing money. So I quit working. I would never not show up on Friday because that was payday, but I'd miss Monday or Wednesday or whatever. And boss comes in one day and says, "You got to show up for work." Okay. And I wouldn't be there. And that went on for, 2 or 3 months. And like I said, I figured out that, I'm giving all my money, all that overtime went back to them, but I didn't want to do that. So I came home one day, and one of my best friends I ran with there at home, I'd been with him to his family down in Frederick, Oklahoma, and his brother had moved to Colorado, working for a guy, and he met me. I always parked at the station and either rode with the guys or whatever. He met me and he says, "Let's go to Colorado. Charlie can get his job driving trucks." "Nah, I don't want to go." "No, come on, you got nothing here." And when I thought about it, you're kind of right, because my ex came to me one day and said, wanted to talk to me, and my owner says, "We need $800 for our furnace went out." And I says, "So? I told you once before, clothes, medical, anything he needs, I will do. That furnace is your problem." And I was afraid she was going to come after me. So I finally agreed, and I was living at home with my mother, so I said, "Let me go home. It's 30 miles. Let me go home and get my shit before I change my mind." And I had bought a 1966 Chevelle SS Super Sport, 396, 375 horse, Muncie 4-speed, 456 rears. It was a 8th mile car, and I hadn't finished paying it off, and I left it behind. I didn't want to take it with me. I wish now I had. So we take off in this little Vega and go to Colorado. It took us 3 days to get there. Got there, and there was no jobs for us in trucking. So the boss that he was working for had a custom harvesting crew, but he didn't have anybody to do the work. And he had 2 combines. He had a 1972, and this was in 1973. I did this. He had a 72, 7700 combine, John Deere, and a 560 Massey. And Charlie and I cleaned them up and drove them to Frederick, Oklahoma. Roaded them 350 miles. Took us 3 days.
You're kidding.
No, and it was a hoot. I slept in the cab, but didn't sleep in, couldn't afford it. And then I got into custom harvesting. I did 1 year with it. So I got to do my farming per se. I ran a combine and just loved it to death, And then another guy wanted me to go work for him, doing the same thing. So I went down to Anthony, Kansas, and helped him fix his shed. And he and another guy and we got his combine safe. And then we went down to the Red River, Oklahoma-Texas border in May, and it started raining, and we couldn't cut. So he said, "You need go to Midland, Texas, get on an oil rig." His name was Danny Green. So we went down in his pickup, got a job in the oil field, working on the rig. He got the crow's nest, and I got the deck below him, and we stayed in a motel. We was doing this for a little while, and they had 2 great big, 1,000-gallon type propane tanks. I thought they were, but they were air compressor tanks. I mean, they're reservoir tanks. It takes a lot of air to run all those air tools and stuff. And they had been into it, and they welded the cap. The cap is concave. Well, you're supposed to weld it with the concave down. They didn't. Well, there was no way to keep the pressure, and it blew that cap up. And Danny and I both up in the top. We said, "That's it, we're done." And I went home.
Home back to Illinois?
No.
Back to Colorado?
Back to Colorado. Yeah, no, I was done with Illinois.
Yeah.
So I went back home. I had a girlfriend then, and we were living together, and she had 2 kids, and I tried to raise them like my own. And I went to work for a guy that, where we were working the combines at, the guy had a gas station, he also had a plane, and this guy sent me to Hereford, Texas to pick up a truck, and they had to fly me down there. And I get in, I'm not scared in there. I got in this plane, didn't know if the guy really knew how to fly it. He was teaching his brother how to fly VFR with the hood. And went down there, I went to get the truck, come home, and so there wasn't anything else for that to do. And I worked for another guy. He had a restaurant. Him and his wife had a restaurant. It was called Branding Iron. It was just a little bitty thing. Loved to eat because they'd make cheesesteaks and they'd run them through the slicer and all that stuff. And we became good friends. And he had bought an old white tractor, semi, from AG, the food company. He stretched it out, put a 32-foot box on it, and then he went down to Oklahoma or to Kansas, and he bought a pup to put behind it and hauling grain. And he had a guy we'd haul wheat out of Yuma, Colorado to Lincoln or Omaha, and the guy was a drunk. And he'd come back, it'd take him 4 days to make a 24-hour trip. And Jerry said to me, he says, "You want to drive that truck?" And I says, "Yeah, why not? You think you're going to?" I said, "No problem." I had done a little of that before with a friend of mine's truck. And so I take off. And I had moved from Yuma 12 miles west to a little town called Otis, and I lived in a house with my girlfriend and I. And it was an open lot, and the truck is sitting there. And all of a sudden, I'm banging on the door, and I go, "What's going on?" Open the door, and Jerry's there just screaming and hollering at me. "You, no one knows." And I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "You're worse than he was. Your truck." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Jerry, I've already been to Lincoln back and Greeley and back ready to get." And his eyes got wide, and he settled down. After that was good. He had a brother-in-law worked at Owen Thompson Transportation. It was a moving company there in Denver. He went out and bought a 1973 Cowboy Freightliner, gave it to me to drive, and he went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and bought a brand new Cornhusker 45-foot triaxle trailer for me to pull. That's how much he thought of me.
Yeah, right.
And I did that for a while. And then one of the times I was doing this, I met my best friend, I said, who passed away. We're like brothers. I mean, his family, we're just so close, But he was driving an old International blunt nose with a 903 Cummins in it, with a trailer that looked like it had been scrabbled together with Legos, I guess. It was ugly, and everybody made fun of him. But we got to be good friends. And he only weighed 22,000 pounds empty, so we hauled 85,000. We'd run the back roads, and secondary roads in Colorado, you can run 85,000. Interstate is 80. He could haul twice the payload we could, so he was making the money. And he got tired of it, and so he wanted to come to work with us. And Jerry had just bought the first year that White Freightliner split, became Freightliner. He bought the first 1976 Freightliner conventional that came out. He drove it for a little while, and then he let me drive it. And so Danny came to work with and driving my old truck. And so we're running around, and we had CB radios. I had one originally, and we were looking for handles. And they called me the Duck. My friends and his brothers, for some reason, I had a little and they thought it looked like the Duck's bill, so they called me Duck. And to this day, in and beyond that there, my name is Duck. When I got hurt, my name was in the paper, nobody knew me. But anyway, I said, "We got to have handles. I'm Quacking Duck." I ended up shortening it to just Duck, and I said, "What's a good one?" He says, "Whiskey Drummer." I like that. But I never called him Drummer. I called him Drummer, but I never called him Mr. Drummer. And finally, it was just Drummer, And that's why, and we did this until his son-in-law decided he wanted to be on it, and Jerry went and bought a short 110 waist, 10-inch single-axle Freightliner with two dune and doubles, and they had 10-foot tongues between, for the trailer. He wanted me to drive it, so then Jim got my truck. So Danny stayed in the Freightliner, and I had the other one. And I didn't know what I was doing, and it was hard to pull, and I was scared of it because it wiggles, And I ran into a CF driver we was hauling wheat to Denver, across the back roads, out of Yuma down to Akron, that way, and Anton. And it was wintertime, and it snowed, and I'm just poking along. He comes by and blows me and says, "You all right?" And I says, "Yeah." I says, "This is my first trip with this truck. I don't know, He says, "Look straight ahead." Because I was looking in the mirror, watching it, and doing this. He says, "Don't look at the mirror, straight ahead, get over on your right side in the snow, it'll give you traction. And when you get to the top of the hill, ease off, and when you start down, just hammer it. And then ease up, and that's how I started driving that thing, and it became like second nature to me. And I get people following me, and I'd like to just be right on your butt, because you don't like to draft it. And I do this, and that trailer's over here, and they're gone. But the funny thing was, we were someplace in Kansas, we had to load I got upset because I could turn that thing around and put the nose of the tractor against the back trailer. You know, that's how it was good. I did that, and then my boss decided he didn't like his concrete driveway. We only had one cement company outfit there in town, and he didn't think they did a good job. His driveway was cracking. He thought he could do better. So he went down to Kentucky and he bought a brand new batch plant, and then he bought 2 old 1980 diamond rail cement trucks with 180 Cummins and 5 and 3 speed. Should have bought new trucks because they were junk. One of them froze up, but we did that. And I started hauling cement, and we started pouring cones for grain bins and flats. I love doing flats. I did a lot of flats for hog farms and stuff, but we couldn't figure out why we couldn't get the flow to stay. It would run off. We finally figured out that the guy that was doing it, we were getting worse gravel and worse sand to put in it. And he was running pit running, which had the dirt, all the clay, and that held all that together, so it worked. And Danny and I got tired. We decided we wanted to move on. He moved to Sterling, went to work for a trucking company, which I eventually ended up in. I went to Fort Morgan, working for a friend, and I did that until their insurance wouldn't take me because I'd had some tickets. And so I went down the street, worked for another guy, and did that from 1978 till May of 1979. And had a lot of fun. I had a 1972 RL 700 Mac with a 318 and a 4x4 married 4-speed. He had a 318 with a 5 and 4 separate. We'd run ragged because people didn't always run empty like that. There was an outfit called, I can't remember their names, but they thought their shit didn't stink. They always passed, and we just blew by them. It just made them mad, you know. And then a position opened up in Sterling with the company Danny was with, and I had gone up there many times and visited with them stuff, and I was a smoker. I smoked 2 or 3 packs a day for a long time, and I smoked for about 18 years. And I got into Cools and Salem's, and Cools is menthol Salem. And you know, if anybody knows anything about cigarettes, you know what that does to you. And I went over and had cigarettes. Now I could have walked from here to the end of this building, across the street and get cigarettes, but I didn't want to. And I said, he smoked Pall Mall without the filters. I wouldn't smoke them. So his wife had Winston's, and the first one was pretty good. Second one was not that bad. And on the way home, there was used to be a rest area between Sterling and Brush on I-76. It's gone now, but I lit up and I started coughing and hacking, and I literally thought I was going to blow my head off my neck. I threw the cigarette away, I threw that pack away, and I had just gotten a brand new Mac embossed Zippo lighter, and it went out the window too. And I never touched another cigarette again. I went cold turkey. But anyway, I went up there and started working for them guys, and we had 4 trucks. And we were hauling wheat out of there. From there, they had the elevator. We hauled the wheat there to Gooch Mill in Lincoln or whenever, you know, go to Omaha and stuff. And we had a little restaurant. We called it our meeting point. It was like our, I can't think of the term I want to use, but it was our little station we showed up to, dispatch unit, you know. And of course, we couldn't get past the truck stop. So the first truck stop is in Oglala, Nebraska. The next one's in North Platte. The next one's in Lexington. The next one's in York. Then Lincoln. We stopped at every one of them, all out and back. And we did that for 2 years. And then I got caught for speeding. I'd already had 2 tickets, and they took my license, wouldn't let me have it read, so I had to get out of the truck. So I went and worked in the elevator. And one of the guys that was running the elevator inside, he was a doof, you know. I think he was stealing. Anyway, he quit, and I took his position, and I was doing fine. And I had met my wife back in 1977 when I lived in Yuma. Her cousins lived there, and we were all very close. And she found me when I was in Fort Morgan, and I went and seen her. We would date once a year. So I had brought her down. I turned 34 in August of 1981. I had been going out. I take her to tractor pulls and stuff, and I took her with me. My sister got married in Illinois, and So I stuck with it. We were going to get married in September 23rd. I think it was about the same time that my mother and dad got married. I don't know exactly. But I got up on Friday morning, the 4th of September, 1981. I had moved out of my little bitty apartment and moved into this double wide. It had a raised kitchen floor, It had only been there a week. And I went to work that morning, about 10:30 in the morning. I'm in the elevator trying to run grain, and we had a hole cut in the back of the leg to gravity feed it, so it would take it in the bucket would run up top, and it was running. And I opened it to trim flow, and I noticed something that was out of whack, and I went to shut the leg off, and everything blew up. 10:30 in the morning. And if I'd have been smart in thinking, I'd have dove out the open door onto the tracks. Maybe I'd have got hurt, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have been burned up, but I went, and there was a cover, about 30-inch cover, and I was standing on it. If I went down, and this is where the bottom of the leg was, this is where the bearings and stuff. I had just cleaned it out. It was 15 feet deep and 12 feet of stuff in it when I cleaned it out 3 or 4 weeks before. And I went and pushed it, because this micro switch is shut, it's not direct current. And I pushed it, but it shut it down, and that's what, too late, it blew. And it lifted that cover, and I went straight down, never touched the thing. When I had to go down before, I would always scrape my back. And I got down in there, and I go, oh, well, this isn't good. Okay. And I know I'm out of sorts, and by that time, the ladder's this high off the floor. And all right, if I can get out, I'll be fine. And I put my foot on it, and I couldn't get out. So I said, all right, this is it. This is where we go. And they found me, and I ended up in the hospital.
Well, initially they couldn't find.
They couldn't find me initially. We had a crew out working, putting them to overhead bins, and he got, second degree burns on his back. I had second and thirds when it was all said and done, over 65%, which was my face and arms, back and the front. My lower extremity was fine. That's why my hands are, my face are the way they are this day. My other boss, there was 2 brothers ran it. One ran the other ran the trucks. I found him, and they pulled me out and took me to the hospital there in Sterling. And right away they knew they wasn't anything they can handle. And a few months.
You were conscious this whole time?
Yeah. I knew everything was going on.
And a lot of pain, I assume. No.
It burnt the nerves. My nerves were dead. Good thing. But anyway, a few months before, down in Pinion Trucks up in Pueblo, a telephone man had got burnt saving 2 little girls from a tanker that exploded, ran into the pumps, and they knew they couldn't handle me, so they got an ambulance and sent me to University of Colorado. I don't know what it was, but Denver, off Colfax and 9th Street, or Colorado 9th Street, just south of Colfax. And this guy, it was a 5-unit burn unit. And this guy, unfortunately, was 53 years old, died the morning I got hurt. And I got his room. And I got all the bells and whistles, and they could sit right there, and that's where they took me. My truck boss was upset that they didn't fly me out. And he said, I'll sue you. If you don't make it, I'll sue you, pay your pants off. And they said, well, look, in order, we got to get the call to the chopper pilot. He's got to get it warmed up. It's an hour down, it's an hour back, it's half an hour to get you loaded, and the hospital doesn't have a helipad, so you got to take it to Lutheran and then put him in the ambulance, so he's going to get there quicker in the ambulance. And unfortunately, my friend that I worked with in Fort Morgan passed the ambulance, I found out later. And he would have freaked it. I finally told him about it, but all the way to the hospital, I'm just,
Really?
I'm having a good time. And I asked for water, and she wouldn't give me because she thought I'd choke. I got some ice, and it came rush hour time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when we get there in the Colorado Boulevard, and we're stopping. And I said, what are we stopping for? Rush hour. And I says, you're a ambulance, let's go. And they finally got me there, and they asked if there was anybody I could call, and I happened to know my wife's parents' phone number, so I gave it to them. And they called her, and her dad came home and picked her up, and they were there before I got there. So they said that when they got there that they didn't know who I was. She said, Dad, is that him? They said my head was the size of a basketball. And they put me in the room, and they said, Mr. Kessinger, can you hear us? Yeah. You breathe on? I said, yeah, I'm fine. Well, we're going to intubate you. I said, no, you're not. Well, if we don't intubate you, and you close off, you're dead. And they did it. And then all this stuff became a nightmare. But like I said, I had the attention of everybody. I mean, I think of this guy all the time, that he gave up his life for me.
Yeah.
I can't never repay that, you know.
How long were you then there at the burn unit?
I was in the main burn unit for 35 days, something like that. This was in September, so I think in October they pulled me out. But before they did that, they would debride my skin. And I was on so much morphine, I was happy that I was hallucinating very, very well. You know, I was flying in helicopters in outer space, and I thought this Indian tribe was trying to initiate, because they do that. You saw the movie with Harrison in it where they hung him from his teats.
Oh, yeah.
Or, you know, I thought they was going to do that. But anyway, my hands were burning, and I found out later what it was they were debriding the skin off my hands, you know. But anyway, I was fairly well enough. They had a great big tub. It was 4 foot wide, 7 foot long, so that you could put the gurney down in it. And they took me in there, and they set me down in it. And one of the burn nurses, she was the same age as my wife, was going to get married at the same time we were. And she was a little bitty girl, a little blonde. And she's hanging with her elbows over this tub crying. And her name, I think, was Cindy or something like that. And I said, what's the matter? Well, I'm hurting you. I said, so? Well, I don't want to hurt you. And I said, that's okay. But I don't want. I said, all right, what do you got to do to fix me up? I got to hurt you. I said, then do it. And like I said, I never thought I was going to die. And to be honest, to go back before this happened, I think I had been prepared, because I saw in the magazine what they have to do and what it takes for a burn patient to survive. So I knew what they were going to do. And being, you know, that I was all doped up, it didn't matter. I thought one of the nurses was chasing me through the rafters trying to kill me with ether, and obviously that's not true because there's no open rafters. Turned around and I stopped breathing, and then I started breathing because the respirator get going. But I got out on the floor, and my wife met a couple. He got hurt about the same time that he was over in Carbondale, got almost cut completely in two with an end loader, and she was a witness to them getting married. They put him in the room because they were all friends, you know. And we're still friends to this day. I haven't seen him in a long time, but he ended up becoming a gunsmith and moved to Oregon, where she was from, and did gunsmithing for the sheriff's department and stuff. But we became friends, and I got one day to go to the bathroom and did fine undoing it, but I couldn't tie it back. And his name is Tommy. And I said, Tommy, can you do me a favor? And he said, what? Would you tie this? Yeah. And I said, you know, I wish I had your hands. And he put me in my place. You know what he said? Wish I had your legs. That makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then 120 days or something like that, I came home. Nobody would tell me what my odds were until the day I walked out. And then they said you had 1% chance, I think they said it was. I was supposed to go out through the basement on the slab, and my son couldn't see me at the funeral. And I've been pushing those odds ever since. I've done a lot of things, you know.
Wow.
But I got to mention that I'm a believer, and my wife doesn't want me to tell this. Maybe I shouldn't, but I had a point when I was in there, in the burn part itself, that I said, God, I can't do this. Let me go. Take me.
Fair enough.
And all of a sudden, there's this river appears, and this little scow, and this man, pictured like you see in the church walls, with his beard and everything, going like this. And I go, no. And he was gone, and I was out.
Huh.
And they found out later, we correlated that I was going to die. I had an infection that was taking me, and I got out of it.
Wow.
And then, of course, before it was all said and done, I almost lost my left leg. They slit my arms open because the pressure was restricting, but they forgot about my legs. And I got gangrene on my left leg, and I was going to take it, and I said no. So I ended up cutting that muscle out. So I have a little limp gait when I walk, but I still got my leg, and I can't run, but I can walk, you know.
Wow. Wow.
But the idea that those were my odds, you know, so.
And that's, what did you say, 47 years ago now? How long?
44. Well, it was 81, so it'd be 45 years. It's already 45 years ago.
Wow.
44 years we've been married. It'd be 46 years. No, it'd be 45 years, yeah.
Do you have any lingering effects or pains from?
No.
Yeah, really?
I healed. I looked like death warmed over. My face was red and blotchy. My hands and my arms and my legs where it took the grafts, but they're all gone. My face is a lot better. My hands, fortunately, my hands curled. They had put pins in my fingers to keep them from clawing, but their hands are for driving. So for 40-some years after, or 38 years after this all happened, I've had done a lot of driving.
Really? Yeah.
So my hands are shaped for it, you know. What else?
Yeah.
After I got out, I spent 6 years in rehab. We sued the railroad. We sued Westinghouse, which was the motor. We tried to sue the contractor that rewired anything, but the attorneys decided that wouldn't be good. It's hometown district court. He's a good old boy, but he didn't wire it right. It should have been mineral insulated wires in it once, and so there was a secondary explosion because of that. We lost that because they papered us to death, but it didn't win a suit against the railroad, but that went into our third-party suit to go after other stuff, and we ended up with nothing.
Oh, man.
I had a friend that said, "Ron, you deserve money." And I said, "Yeah, I probably do," but I said, "This is the point. If I'm supposed to get it, I will. Fine. If I don't, that's okay."
Huh.
I've never been one to, I like to have money. I don't want to be broke, but it's never been my crux. You know, we get along just fine, and I'm in good shape as it is today with what I have. My Social Security and my VA benefits are doing me well, but money has never been my issue. You know, we'll get by, but I got tired of dealing with all that was going on. I did finally go to wastewater and water treatment because they're going to pay for it, right? Because it's workman's comp. And I went through that, and I tried to get a job and a lot of political stuff. And I had a friend that served it because he had 7 kids, and I was fine with it. But I got tired, and I told my attorney, I said, "What does it take to prove that you're disabled?" He says, "If you can push a pencil across the table, you're not disabled." I said, "Fine, I'm out of here. I'm at my rope's end." I said, I know every soap opera, every character, every line. I've got to do something. So I found an ad in a paper for a job out of Commerce City and told my wife, "I'm going to get my medical, I'm going to go down and apply." And it did. Chicago, Omaha, Denver Express, which is called Code. We hauled beer out of Kansas to Detroit and other places and swinging. And I walked in, filled out the app, and I got up to leave. And I love this woman. She's 4 years old. She's not around anymore, but was like a mother. "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm leaving. I know the drill. Don't call me. You'll call us." She says, "Sit down. He'll talk to you." So I sat down. He says, "I see you got a lot of miles hauling grain, nothing with the rest." I said, "Yeah, I know." He says, "Would it bother you if you went somebody?" I said, "Yeah, anything I can earn is great." I went home and thought I had a job. They didn't hire me. I went down there and I had the job, and I went to work. This is in 1987, and I worked from October 87 until May of 1989, and I got tired because this is about the time the Rockies were going to be coming in, and this guy wanted to buy, that owned the company, wanted to get out. He wanted to purchase it, and I had got tired of having to pay lumpers fees because, you know, you got to pay for these people under grocery stores. It should have been in their business, and I wasn't getting reimbursed. And I said, "Either this or I'm quitting." And I quit and went to work for a friend that I had known back in my Yuma days. He had 6 trucks, and I was driving one of them. my first trip was to Seattle, Washington. It's on Saturday. I had to be there Monday morning at 6:30, and I was there. And they couldn't believe I made 1,500 miles in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
Anyway, that's what I did, and that's what I continued doing. I left him because I had a very major wreck in 2001, right before 9/11. Actually, it was. And so I went to work for a friend hauling flatbed for a while, and then went doing some other stuff. And I continued in my trucking career until 2021, and
Wow.
and in my driving, I always 3 years was the max I ever made, but I always moved my stuff one step better on the pay scale, and in retrospect, I started out at 16 cents a mile, the first company. I ended up at 43 cents a mile on my last company, and I paid by the hour this last one I did, and I got tired, we're in and out all the time. I wanted to retire, but I didn't really want to quit. So I quit the local company. I said, I'm going to retire. Well, I did that because I didn't want them to be upset. My friend said, hey, come work for us, take over my job. So I did that. I did that for 7 years, and I finally said I'd had enough, and I quit in 2021. But in the meantime, COVID hit, and my friend told me about the VA benefits with Agent Orange, and so I applied for them, but I got shut out because of COVID. In July, I got a hold of it, turned all my paperwork in, went through all the rituals, went to the doctor they sent me to, and ended up with 100% disability, for which I am thankful. But I'm upset also that so many of our guys that deserve it are still fighting it, and have died, and I got it without any problems whatsoever.
Wow. Wow.
Anyway, my wife and I got married in January 16th of 1982. We've been married 44 years now. We have 2 kids. I lost my first son from this marriage from stroke when he was 43, and I got to have him for 22 years. But that's the story of my life.
And you've got 2 granddaughters
I've got 2 granddaughters and a great-grandson.
And a great-grandson.
I haven't seen him since he was a year and a half old.
Yeah.
I try to keep in touch. I see my granddaughters once a year. I go see my mother once a year.
Yeah.
She's getting old. She'll be 98 September, and I just lost my sister-in-law's mother, 96, and I know time is getting short. So we're trying to figure out ways that I can spend more time. And I told my wife, if it gets closer, I'll probably be gone for a month at a time. Like I said, my mom's hard to deal with because we're stubborn. We're just exactly alike in all respects, but she can't hear, and I can't talk to her on the phone. So we do a lot of texting, and I'm not the good son, and I haven't been that close to her in that respect, but I've been doing a lot more lately because of things going on. Anyway.
Well, as we start to wind down this interview, is there anything, I didn't ask a lot of questions, but if there's anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about, any other stories that we've been sitting here that floated to the top, so that ideally we round out your story as best we can, or do you think we covered everything that you'd like to cover today? Pretty much. I know we'll always leave out something. We'll always forget
We'll always
something.
leave stuff out. Yeah. And since it's for my family, I think I've talked to a lot of stuff.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't really know off the top of where to go. So.
Okay. Very good. Well, the last question I always like to ask with these interviews is, when you look back on your time in the Army, particularly your time in country in Vietnam, as you look at that period, did it play a role in your life, change your life, affect your life at all, or was it just one of the many chapters in your life that you went through?
It was one page in a continuous chapter of the book.
Okay.
And I've read many. I do want to point out, I forgot about this. 3 years ago, after I retired, I was bored. I sat on a computer and stuff. And I got my friend is like a son, but he's my best friend's son. I wanted to join this lodge. We're sitting in a Fort Collins Elks Lodge 804 here, which I've been a member of since November of 2022. I wanted to do this, and he helped me get into it. I am an advocate for our veterans.
Outstanding.
Whenever I see a veteran, it's always thank you for your service. Do you want to talk about anything? And before I got hurt my back in 2024, I had done 18 shopping trips to Walmart with our veterans through the Veterans Advocate. I've learned a lot from veterans, and I've learned a lot about myself through them, and I got into an incident that threw me off the loop. I had one kid that was suicidal, and I was thrown into him. The regular guy wasn't with us. He was busy, and the other guy wasn't paying attention. He was more into his phone. Got his ass chewed later about it. But I had to deal with this by myself for a start, and I'm trying to, what's going on? And I struggled with it at first because I've never dealt with anybody. I've had a friend that committed suicide when he was very young. He was a close friend of mine, and his folks were, and everything. And it bothers me. And for him walking around with that attitude, I got a handle on it, and I talked to everybody about it, and we done it. But I support this lodge. Anything to do with the veterans. I've done a lot of the golf tournament things, talking to the veterans. I volunteer, serve food or wash dishes, whatever, during the veterans, Memorial Day breakfast and the veterans breakfast. I just talked to a gentleman earlier. I picked up some parts, and I'm going to get him to come and look at this place. It's one of our goals to get more people to come, and I'm not a good speaker in that part. I don't really, I don't like crowds. I don't like noise. But I try to stick myself out there. I am the current Tyler for this lodge. The previous exalted ruler, we had a Tyler, and she wanted him to be one of the trustees, so the position opened. She came and said, would you like to fill it? And I said, you bet. And so for a year and a half, that's what I've done. I will be out in the end of March. There'll be a new Tyler. So, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I did something, and that's what I've always wanted to do. Be a part of this. And so like I said, I'm a very big advocate for all the atrocities that have gone on and the way the government has treated us. I want to go back to when I was in Vietnam. People don't realize, some do, but I heard the story that Johnson wanted this war to go on for 10 years. And I think I, more than most, understood what it was about. It was economy. You know what war does? In World War II, it generated an economy. You had factories going. You've got everything going on to support all that makes this thing work. I hated him for it. I hated Nixon even more for it, but I understood, and people don't realize, and we're being treated like shit. And like I said, I've got people and I'm on a forum, they're always talking about, I've been on this and I got it taken away because my cancer got better. Or I've got Agent Orange and I got this and I got that, And it infuriates me to no end how we've been treated. For Korea and World War II and World War I.
Yeah.
So.
Understandable. Well, Ron, I want to thank you for sitting down today to tell your story, but just as important, or probably more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is the AK-47 that I had to purchase to fight with. I got it just before Tet 1968.
Slower one?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
This is me at my job. Cigarette in one hand and a pen in the other. This is a picture of me in Vietnam, outside.
That's they're at the beach there?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
This is barracks, I think it was, what is that, Fort Leonard Wood?
Okay.
These are pictures of where I was stationed. There's no buildings in it, but it's the beach, South China Sea. This is a picture of me at the Ricky Shai and my R&R in Penang, Malaysia.
Okay. And then below that.
And then that's me with my dog that I rescued. And then the other one's me with my dog and rescued. And
then this top one.
there's me standing in front of a Jeep. I don't know what I was doing. I was just standing there. This is in Vietnam, Tuy Hoa. This is the company I went to work for in '87 after being off work for 6 years. It's Chicago, Omaha, Denver Express. These are pictures of the wastewater treatment plant south of Fort Collins that I trained in as a wastewater technician for things that the state wanted me to do, pay for. This is schooling I went for. This is a picture of me standing on Continental Divide, Cameron Pass, west of Fort Collins, Colorado. This is a picture of my father and his Navy buddies. This is a picture of my mother's brother, Cecil. He made these guitars and stuff. Very good luthier. This is a picture of my brother's family, my sister on the right and my son on the left. I don't know when it was taken, but this picture is a picture of my wife, Debra. We've been married, it'll be 44 years come January.